In December of 1975, Neil Young embarked on a secret tour with the new lineup of Crazy Horse, playing at small clubs and bars on the California coast near to Young's ranch. They struck deals with the owners of the venues. They said Neil Young will play your club this weekend, just don't tell anybody, and pay the already advertised band for their gig. And they started off at the Boots and Saddle in La Honda, California, and then played at Margarita's Cantina and the Catalyst in Santa Cruz, the Inn of the Beginning in Cotati, River City in Fairfax, and the Marshall Tavern in Marshall. They played songs from the new album, Zuma, and a couple of new songs, Country Home, which was a tribute to Young's Northern California homestead, which would not actually be released until 1990 on Ragged Glory, and one other song that would become one of his most played and most beloved anthems, Like a Hurricane. The song was born sometime in the summer of 1975 after Young had had an operation to remove some nodes on his vocal cords and was advised by his doctor to take a vow of silence for a while in order for his throat to recover. This, however, did not stop Young at this time from continuing the lifestyle he had been leading since his last relationship had ended, i.e. going out drinking with his friends and attempting to pick up girls. Because he couldn't speak, he enlisted his friends to do the talking for him. He and I would do this sign language thing, said his friend Jim Russell. I knew Neil so well from hanging out that I was able to talk for him. It was one such night when Young and his friends were at a place called Venturi's in La Honda, and Neil was completely smitten with a particular woman named Gail. Of course, Gail, like the wind. According to his friends, Gail got away that night and the relationship never went any further. But when they got back to the ranch, Young started playing like a man possessed on a stringman keyboard, would pace around the room and then go back to the keyboard and carry on playing. Roadie Taylor Phelps said Young was still sat at that keyboard playing alone hours later as the sun came up. He was just playing away like Beethoven. He looked like a fucking maniac, he said. The earliest written manuscript of Like a Hurricane is dated July the 27th, 1975, and it has very different words to the released version, although one line did stay the same: "You are like a hurricane, there's calm in your eye." Young started playing the song straight away with Crazy Horse at the ranch, but after 10 days of playing it over and over again, rehearsing it and trying to record it with the usual arrangement of 2 guitars, bass and drums, it never quite clicked. Neil didn't have enough room to solo, said Poncho. He didn't like the rhythm I was playing on the guitar. One day, after several hours of rehearsing the song over and over, trying to get it right, the band were ready to call it a night when Poncho just started playing around with the chords on the stringman keyboard, and Young heard this and said, that maybe that's the way to do it. Let's try it. The band then launched into the song one more time, this time with Poncho on keyboards. Hearing the band suddenly playing again, the engineer quickly started the tape recording once more, as it had been switched off, thinking that they were done for the day. The intro was missed, but the rest of it was captured, and this take was the one that was later released on American Stars and Bars in 1977. Well, the instrumental had been captured anyway. Young had not sung on this version, as he was still resting his voice. A few weeks later, Young attempted to record the song again, this time with vocals, but realised this earlier instrumental version had already nailed it. So instead, he overdubbed the vocals, a rare thing for Young at this point, who would almost always record live vocals with the band, but in this one decided to make an exception, and he overdubbed the lead and the harmony vocals on this one. Like a Hurricane stands tall in the catalogue of great Neil Young songs. Its main riff descends down from A minor to E minor, reminiscent of Del Shannon's early 60s classic Runaway, with which it also shares a shift from the minor key to the major key in the chorus, although Runaway changes to A from A minor, with Hurricane shifting up from A minor to C. The effect, though, is the same: sheer euphoria before the shift back to the minor key. The influence was acknowledged by Young himself, who said to Jimmy McDonough, "It's a minor descending thing that opens up. That's what they have in common. It's like Runaway, but with the organ solo going on for like 10 minutes. Musically, there are other influences in there as well. In my opinion, if you listen to Young's version of Greensleeves, which was recorded live around this time, it shares a similar minor descending chord sequence. Lyrically, Hurricane also shares a preoccupation with the weather, like runaway, i.e. I'm walking in the rain. Hurricane goes further though and imagines the object of affection herself as the rapidly rotating weather system, complete with calm in her eye, just like an actual hurricane does. And just like with an actual hurricane, the narrator of the song, of course, keeps getting blown away. Written bang in the middle of Young's post-Carrie, happily drunken period, the lyrics reflect this intoxicating chaos where nothing is exactly clear, images blur into one another, and dreams are hard to discern from realities. Once I thought I saw you in a crowded hazy bar. I'm just a dreamer and you are just a dream. Time just slips away between us on our foggy trip. Nothing was settled in this period. Everything was up for grabs. Women, drugs, booze, and it all contributed to this swirling hurricane of desires and dreams that was picking Young up off the ground and blowing him around from bar to bar and from continent to continent. Before the band embarked on their next tour, they recorded another new song that wouldn't find its way onto an album for another 2 years. This was Look Out For My Love, and it was mainly acoustic, although Young later overdubbed some windshield wiper guitar parts onto it. Although an acoustic song, the band partied their way through the session, staying up from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m, eventually capturing a great performance in the early hours, thanks to some chemical assistance. We kept getting higher and higher and crazier, Poncho said. We had enough blow to last a week. The song was eventually released with overdubs on the Comes a Time album in 1978. But after this session, in March of 1976, Young and the Horse travelled for the first time to Japan, which blew Poncho's mind. Japan was unbelievable, he said later. They greeted us at the airport like the Beatles. They played multiple dates in Nagoya, Osaka, Fukuoka and Tokyo. The show at the Budokan in Tokyo was being filmed and recorded, and Poncho and Billy decided just before they went on stage that this would be a perfect time to drop acid without telling their bandmates. We did Cowgirl in the Sand, and Billy and Ralph were singing the harmonies, Poncho said later. I opened my eyes and saw big mandalas coming out of the back of their heads, all these colours and shit. I'd hit the strings of my guitar, they were like 80 different colours that bounced off the floor and hit the ceiling. At the end of the second song, Neil came running over to Billy and me, put his face right between us, up close to us, and said, "Man, we're psychedelic tonight." After the gig, the band went straight to the airport to fly to Europe and were frankly bewildered as they tried to figure out how to board the plane, what with all the signs being in Japanese and everything. And Young was being freaked out by some Japanese man who kept trying to give him a package. Despite still tripping his balls off, Poncho stepped in and decided to take a look in the suspicious package. It contained all their passports and tickets. Young, therefore, entrusted them to Poncho. You're in charge. The tripping guitarist, still trying to figure out where to go, suddenly saw a group of guys with machine guns. I did a 360 at the airport, he said. Thankfully, his bandmates were on hand to bring him back, calm him down, and explain to him that this group of suspicious men was in fact the camera crew that had been filming their tour the whole time. Dates in Norway, Denmark, West Germany, Paris, Rotterdam, Brussels and Amsterdam followed. En route from Germany to Paris, Poncho had a bunch of hash on him, so he thought the best thing to do would be to eat it, which he did, but he still had some left on his person when he boarded the plane. And then when they were on the plane, airport security, with guns and everything, came onto the plane and wanted to speak with all 4 band members. Poncho, completely freaking out and absolutely paranoid, stuffed the remaining hash in his pants. This one security guy took his hat off, he said later, and I realised he's just an 18-year-old kid. And he said, "Can I have your autograph?" Happy and relieved that that was all that they actually wanted, as the plane took off, Poncho consumed the rest of the hash and spent most of the flight tripping out, listening to a whole orchestra playing in my head, as he put it. After a very welcome visit to Amsterdam, where the band could actually smoke pot to their heart's delight completely legally, the band landed in the UK for 4 nights at the Hammersmith Odeon. This was also being filmed, and again, Billy and Poncho decided to drop acid. I vividly remember Southern Man, he said. It was wildly out of control. Fast, slow, up, down. At the end, we were singing, and I hear this tiny little voice. I turn around, and it was just me. Well, everyone else had stopped playing. Listening to the bootlegs of the tour, we can hear this version of Southern Man played at the Hammersmith Odeon, and it is fantastically wild, with lots of dramatic changes in the dynamics. So it's easy to understand how it must have seemed seemed completely crazy to Poncho when he was in the middle of his LSD trip. The way they jam on Southern Man on this tour is absolutely fantastic, so it's a must hear. And the sound quality from these bootlegs from this tour are actually pretty good for the most part, and there's lots of them on YouTube at the time of the recording of this video, so they're worth checking out. And of course, in recent years, Neil Young also released the album Odin Budokan, which is a compilation of these two LSD-soaked Crazy Horse sets. Also essential listening. The band finished this European leg of the tour in Scotland at the Glasgow Apollo on the 2nd of April, where before the gig, Young went busking on the street outside Glasgow's Central Station, where he was filmed playing the Old Laughing Lady on a banjo wearing a deerstalker hat. Upon returning to the States, a full-scale summer stadium tour was planned for Neil Young and Crazy Horse, which the newly reformed band was very much looking forward to, until Neil Young did something that he had gotten a notorious reputation for over the years. He simply changed his mind. Unbeknownst to his bandmates, he had recorded some material with Stephen Stills back in January, and now, at the last minute, he had decided to dump the horse and go on the road with Stills instead. And apparently, the horse were the last to know. "No one even told us," said Poncho. "We stayed up at the ranch waiting for Neil to come back." Poncho had broken his thumb playing basketball, so was a bit worried about how this would affect his playing on the upcoming tour. Manager Elliot Roberts, though, told him, "Don't worry about the tour. Neil's going out with Stephen. He doesn't need you guys." Poncho in particular took this pretty badly. "We didn't know what had hit us," he said later. Poncho said some of his friends from the organised crime industry were so mad on his behalf that they even suggested they could intervene and have Neil taken out. Fortunately, Poncho talked them out of this drastic measure, but when asked later would they have really carried this out, he replied, "Oh yeah, for a six-pack of beer." After this first instance of Neil being Neil towards him and his bandmates, Poncho realised that he could never fully rely on Young for his musical employment all the time, so he said, "I always made sure I had something else going on for myself. I never sat around and waited for him." Despite this ignominious treatment after such a positive touring experience, the new Crazy Horse would patiently wait in the wings for that time when Neil was done with whatever wild project the muse had sent him chasing after, and they would always step in when called upon for many years to come, and their subsequent collaborations would become the stuff of legend. But for now, we'll leave their story there, as now Neil Young had reunited with his old best friend, best nemesis, and best guitar solo dueling partner, Stephen Stills. And that will be the story of the next video in this series. Until then, make sure you're subscribed and notified, and check out some of the other videos on this channel. You may enjoy them, but that's all from me from this one. Bye for now. I'm just a dreamer, and you are just a dream. You could have been anyone to me. Moment you touch my lips, that perfect feeling when time just slips away between us on our foggy trip.